if you're more comfortable, you can send the question to Dia in a text box, and then Dia, maybe you can summarize questions and subpoint, ask me. But I would like to keep this session as much as possible an interactive session. So I know that there may be questions, but I'll try to pause as I go through, and please feel free to raise your hand or just use the chat box here and put down your question, and I'll try to answer as many questions as I can. So with that, if I could share my screen. So can you see my screen clearly?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. So today I'm going to talk about systematic literature review. It's a rather increasing research method that's being used by people and academics and practitioners from different disciplines. So regardless of where you come from in terms of your educational background, whether you are an undergraduate student, postgraduate, or a PhD student, or an academic, you will find this method useful and relevant to a research that you may be doing. But before I start, I want to give you a little bit of short introduction about myself. So I'm currently head of department of actuarial studies and business analytics here at Macquarie Business School in Macquarie University in Sydney, Australia. So before that, I did my PhD at University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia, on information systems. And then after that, I moved to UTS. I was there for a couple of years. That is when Dia and I met, and she did her PhD, and everything started, in terms of post-PhD collaboration between us. So my research interests are primarily
excuse me, but I'm sorry to cut you again, because I got information from my student that your presentation point is upside down.
Is it?
On my PowerPoint, it looks fine. Maybe I would like to confirm the audience, ya. Mas Cahya, Mas Randi memang terbalik ya PowerPoint-nya ya?
Not upside down actually, but you should what is it, to swap the presentation and the view.
Oh yeah, your presentation view, Babak. We can see your notes.
Let me share it again.
Yeah. Terima kasih, Mas Randi.
I think you should click the display setting and then swap the view.
Sorry, let me do it again and see how it looks. Is it how does it look now?
It is the entire PowerPoint.
It's okay. So let me maximize this and see how it goes.
Yeah, that's correct now.
Okay, that's good. All right, so my research interests are business analytics, responsible AI, ethics in AI and analytics, and social media and online communities, and digital transformation. So generally, if you have any questions in this space, feel free to reach out to me. And of course, Dia, if you feel more comfortable, because we do some work together. So I would like to, before I start, open this presentation with some maybe question for discussion if anyone has any thought in the beginning. But otherwise, want to show you a list of research methods that typically students and academics use. Survey is a very popular one. Normally, everyone at some point in their research life gets to use surveys and questionnaires. Interviews is also another very popular research method. These are the type of methods that is very popular across the world. You interview people or you survey your participants. There are some other research methods, design science, analytics. People increasingly use text and quantitative data analytics as part of their research. So these are some of the typical research methods in a way that it helps you to undertake a research, helps you with data collection and data analysis. Now, systematic literature review, or in short SLR, is considered as one of a research method, which is a systematic way of undertaking research, and it helps to collect data and analyze data. So this, I wanted to show and start with this slide to show you that the method that we are talking about, systematic literature review, is one of the research methods that could be used by itself. So you could do one research, for example, undergraduate research thesis using systematic literature review, or you could use it in combination with other methods. So you may choose to combine an SLR with a survey or an interview, or etc., other methods. So by itself, it's an independent sort of research method that can be used in combination with other methods. So before I start and go through the rest, I'd like to pause here and see if there is any observations so far, or anything that you would like to share, or any questions there may be from the floor. Okay, if there is no question, then I'll move on and I introduce what this method is about. I assume almost everyone is familiar with generic literature review, something we call generic literature review. So any research that you want to do, any question that you have, normally starts with understanding what is going on in the literature. So basically what you do is you go out and you read what some other people have done to get an idea of what is going on. So we call it generic literature review, and I'll get to that shortly. What I want to say as part of this presentation is that systematic literature review is a family of that literature review. But as you can see, the term systematic is what makes the difference. So here, the systematic means we have a method here. Now, generic literature review today, I'm not sure how many participants we have so far. We have about 160 participants so far. If I give you one question and all the 160 participants, I ask them, okay, go and do some literature review. Normally what happens is people go to Google Scholar and look for some keywords, and they come back with a review of the literature. But I can promise you that of that 160 people today, if they wanted to do this, we would get 160 different versions of the same topic for the literature review. So because people do it differently, it's very subjective, and it's normally not repeatable. Even if we have researchers here in the room today, we have academics. If you want to go back and do a literature review of a research that you've done, let's say last month or last year, a couple of years ago, you will come up with different results because there was no system behind it. Just you use some ad hoc words. Whereas with systematic literature review, it's repeatable. So this is the key word, and it's more objective. Generally, what is a review? Review is about understanding the current knowledge, including substanding findings, as well as theoretical and methodological contribution to a particular topic. So I have divided this review in two groups, generic literature review and systematic literature review. Dia, I see there's a question. If you could help me understand the question.
Yeah, he's one of my colleagues, and he asked me, will you share the slide to us later after the talk?
Yes, I'm happy to share the slides later.
Thank you.
So moving forward, I'd like to start with generic literature review. I think everybody in this room today, to some extent, is familiar with generic literature review, because all it means is you go to some website like Google or some other websites, and you use some keywords and you come up with some understanding of what is happening in the literature. Now, the literature could be academic literature, and it could be professional literature. It could be newspapers, professional magazines, or it could be academic journals or conferences. As you can see here, there is normally a generic literature review has 4 steps. One is that you start with, sorry, I'm just trying to move this up. You start with finding a research topic. You know, for example, if you wanted to find a topic, something that would make sense to everyone in Indonesia, question is how competitive Indonesia is in digital technologies, or what are some of the areas in digital technologies that Indonesia can improve? You know, a simple question like that. So we start with the question, then what you do is you say, okay, Indonesia and digital technologies. I go, you know, use some websites, and you use your own keywords. If I ask, you know, people today, you know, participants today to nominate some keywords, you all will come up with some different keywords. And then you go, you do some reading, you know, you look up for the papers, take some notes, and then you document, you summarize your understanding and your literature review. And then you go back to your question, you say, okay, is it enough? Do I need to do more? Then if you say, yeah, I need to find a little bit more papers. So you go and use some other keywords, some new keywords, find new papers, take note, and revise your thinking and come up with an analysis. So this circle and this cycle could go on until you are satisfied and happy with the number of papers you have found and with the literature that you have reviewed. So again, I see two questions, or one question. Dia, if you can help with that. That's not a question. I guess it's just thank you, right?
That's
Yes,
just
okay.
thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. So here is a generic literature review. Now, if you wanted to do it, what would you do? A lot of us, we just go to Google Scholar, and you know, we use different keywords. We just put our keywords in here and look for things, look for different papers. Now, I'd like to give this a go and show you a quick, just so that we're all on the same page. So this is Google Scholar, and if I wanted to, for example, understand how Indonesia is doing in digital technologies or digital economy, you know, let's look for this. Now I use these 3 keywords, and I have come up with 300 plus results. As you can see here, there are papers published all the way from 2018, 2011, 19. Then some of them are in Indonesian journals, I assume. Some are in, you know, English-speaking journals. Some published in Indonesia, some published elsewhere. So there are different journals here, different years, and they come from very different disciplines. Now, if I use different keywords, I get different results. So if instead of economy, if I say productivity, then I come up with, you know, 97,000 results, and some different papers here and published in different places. Now, productivity and economy are not the same, but when you do literature review, it's really hard to say and understand which keywords are the right keywords to use, because everyone would say, look, I think this is the right keyword, I use this and that. So there is no consistency. There's no consistency. And as I said, you know, we have 80, 100, right now we have about 200 participants in the room. We will have 200 different versions of literature review, but that's okay. You know, as part of your research, it's okay to conduct generic literature review, come up with your own analysis and reading. But the point is, this is not replicable. Now, why it matters to have something repeatable and replicable? Because as you may know, science and a scientific method is a method that is replicable, to a large extent replicable. If something is not replicable, it's not considered a scientific way. So a survey normally is replicable. You know, if I go back here, if I have survey questions, if you conduct it normally with a similar sample, you normally get similar results. Same thing with interviews. So whereas with generic literature review, you don't get that. It's not replicable. So that's the key point about systematic literature review, something that is rather replicable. So having said that, I would like to introduce now what systematic literature review is. Systematic literature review starts with some generic literature review. So you use your ad hoc keywords, you get to know, what digital economy is about. So you understand what does digital economy means, what's Indonesia doing in this space, what does productivity mean. So you get a little bit of generic ideas. Then you have an understanding of the problem and research question. You identify and specify your problem in detail. So we need to talk about what Indonesia and digital economy mean when we put them together. We have a little bit of discussion through a generic literature review. Then you have a very clear search method. This red box is the key difference between generic literature review and systematic literature review, because we have a system here, something we call search method. You execute the search method, you conduct your research, then you interpret the results, and then here you come with the solutions and answers to your question. So what I want to say is that the key difference is search method. And what I'm going to do for the rest of the presentation today is to go through all of these 4 stages and tell you what they are. I'm going to give you an example of a research question that we have addressed before, and then show you how it works in practice. And then we'll have some time, if possible, for you to maybe just do a little bit of exercise and let me know if there's any questions about these 4 stages. Okay, is there any questions so far? Any observations? Are we happy to proceed?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I start with stage 1, which is problem identification. In stage 1, problem identification, you need to come up with identifying your research questions. So we start with research question. Now, some people may not have a research question today. So what do they need to do? They need to do some generic literature review, read a few papers, understand what is going on in their topic. That topic could be any topic. Could be, in biology, in sociology, in business, accounting, in engineering, could be anything. You start with reading some papers, and then you need to understand what your questions are. So we need to start with that question. So this is going to take a little bit of time until you know what your research questions are. When you have your research questions, you need to think about, okay, what are the gaps in the literature? In what ways these research questions might not have been addressed before? For example, digital economy in Indonesia. Do we have a government report? Do we have academic papers? So you may find some and you say, yes, there are some, but then there's some questions that have not been answered. For example, how can Indonesia be top 5 or top 10 in the world in terms of, digital technology adoption in the country? So a question could be like this: what is it that we can do to become like in top 10 in terms of adoption of technology? So you can say, look, Indonesia has done this and that, but this and this, still, we're not sure how to do it. Then next is discuss the significance of the research. Why is it important? Why does it matter to Indonesia to be a pioneer and a leader in digital technologies, for example, in the Asian region or internationally? So you need to demonstrate why your research question is important. Then step 2 is about specifying your method. So if I go back to this cycle, we start with identifying problem. Next is our search method. So I'm going to talk about search method. When you have your question, so we start from the left-hand side here. Dia, can you see my cursor moving?
Yeah, it's moving.
Yeah, okay, that's cool. So we start with left-hand side. When you have your research question, as you can see, we have 5 steps here. We go through a very systematic method and stages in order to be able to answer this question. So in step 1, you nominate and identify what research keywords you use. Now, in your generic literature review, you normally do not report what keywords you use. You just report the papers that you have found. Whereas in systematic literature review, you identify a very specific, small number of keywords, and you say why you have selected them. This is why systematic literature review is repeatable, because we know what keywords you have used, and anybody from anywhere in the world can use that keyword. So you identify your keywords. For example, you say my keywords are Indonesia, digital, and economy. Then you need to justify why you use that. So in stage 2, you identify the databases or websites that you are using in order to conduct your research. And then you put your keywords in that database and website, and you load your results. So you say that I have used these keywords, I have put them on this website, for example, Google Scholar or Scopus, and I have produced X number of initial results. In the next stage, you need to filter the results based on some criteria. Now, these 5 steps that I'm showing you here, some publications and some authors may use a slightly different process. So some may have a few more phases and some may have less. But generally, it's about starting with nominating keywords, identifying your source, and conducting initial search, and having some criteria to include papers or exclude papers. Now, you need to be very clear about your criteria. So if somebody else wants to use those criteria, they can do so. So for example, you may say that, in stage 3, I want to filter the results based on their title and the relevance of the title to my research question. Then when you do that, if I go back to my initial example here, you notice that, Indonesia digital economy, I have 300,000+ results. Obviously, this is not practical and possible for one researcher to read and examine over 300,000 articles, unless you come up with an artificial intelligence, machine learning system that can read all these articles. We cannot read all of them. So what we need to do, we need to find criteria that, for example, we bring this down from 300,000 article to something more practical, a few thousands or a few hundreds. So because of that, we need to use some criteria to filter and include some papers and exclude the rest. What's happening is that whatever filter and criteria you use, you need to report the number of results. And what you do is, because it's a systematic literature review, you need to say as of, for example, today, what's the date today actually is 4th of November. So you say as of 4th of November 2022, I used these keywords, I used this website, and then I filtered based on title and I got this number. Because if you do the research and search in 2 months, you'll probably get a different number, because each day there are new research being published internationally. So as part of this methodology, you extract and exclude papers that are not relevant and include the ones that are relevant. Now, there are a lot of other criteria that you may consider. For example, if this research is being conducted in Indonesia, you may say that, look, I'm interested in any research that is in English and in Indonesian language, Bahasa, right? If I pronounce it correctly. So you want to say, look, I'm only interested in these 2 languages. I'm probably not interested in other languages. So another criteria, you can add a new phase here, and you say, I'm excluding other languages. I'm also only including 2 languages. And another factor you could have is, for example, you are interested in research that's been published in the past 20 years. And so what you say is anything older than 20 years, I don't want to be included because, for example, you know, whoever is ordering this research, whether it's your university or a government organization, they may say, look, we want some recent articles, the last 10 years or last 20 years. So you can add as many criteria that is relevant here and bring down the number of search to whatever practical number you want it to be. So how do we do that? I'm going to introduce two popular websites today. One is Scopus and the other is Google Scholar. So to show you what criteria you can include in your search. I assume that in Indonesia you have access to Scopus, but if you don't, or if your university doesn't offer that, that's okay, because you can use Google Scholar, which in many cases is free to access. So is there any questions before I get to show how to undertake this?
Maybe a question from me, and I think most of my students will ask you inside their mind. They wonder, can we use just Google to search things?
Okay, if you use Google, all right, let me take you to this website. And if you use Google Scholar, what happens is it gives you options that Google doesn't. You can go here, if you click on this, and if you go to advanced search, there are criteria and factors here that that are not available in Google. Google includes any, you know, it has its own search criteria, but it's not designed for sort of academic research. And as you can see, for example, here, it doesn't offer you a lot of advanced Google advanced search options unless you write some, you know, codes to be able to do that. Whereas in Google Scholar, you can just simply go to advanced search and look for journals. And another difference is that Google includes any document. So it's not limited to publications. Anything, any blog, anything unrelated, you know, any non-academic research is included. It's just anything and everything, any website. Whereas in Google Scholar, it's more about, you know, academic publications or some of the professional publications. So that's a big difference. So definitely we encourage, you know, Google Scholar. Now, as you can see with Google Scholar, it doesn't give you a lot of options for your search criteria. For example, I can add, I can say that Indonesia digital economy, but I do not have the option of this term to be showing in abstract, for example. Only I have two options, either in the title of the article or anywhere in the article. So you see, I have very few options. It also gives me the option of if I want to look for particular author, which in this case we don't. And also if you're looking for particular journals, you can put it in here. But as you can see here, it doesn't give me the option of selecting the whole business discipline or the whole engineering discipline. It doesn't give me that option. It just says, put the name of the journal. In many cases, we don't have all journals' name. Another criteria that it gives you, criterion, is the date. So for example, you can say, I'm interested in anything that's published after year 2000. So anything older than that, I don't want. So as you can see, you know, it gives you some options and some criteria, but it's not very rich. Whereas with Scopus, it's actually probably the best website to do systematic literature review because it gives you a lot of options. Now let's have a look at this. In here, you can select a lot of factors for your search. You can say, I want to look for papers that have Indonesia digital economy in abstract, title, and keywords. So this is something that we don't have in Google Scholar because in here it's just title or anywhere else. So that's one big difference. Another thing is you can select this to be only in article title, for example, or only in abstract, or only in the keywords. Now, the good thing with Google and with Scopus is that it gives us a number of other options. Now, if you want to look at Indonesia, can we use any other name for Indonesia? Dia, does the country have any secondary name? I don't think it does. So what we can do is, if I'm looking for anything that's related to Indonesia, I can assume that the term is used somewhere in here. But if I want to add more criteria to my search, I can just add search field. In here, I can say digital. Now, I want to pause here and I ask audience, can you share with me your thoughts? What else can we use instead of digital? Can we think of something else instead of digital that talks about computer, IT, internet, anything that's related to digital? Can you think of any other keyword?
Okay, Babak, I would like to translate it in Indonesia. Maybe for some of my students can't grasp it all.
Yes, that's a good idea.
Ya, mungkin ada kata kunci lain nggak yang bisa dimasukkan ke dalam kalau kita ingin meneliti tentang digital economy di Indonesia? Selain digital, one of my students says technology.
Yes, technology is a good one. Automation, yes. What else? Just put in some keywords in here.
Ya, mungkin yang lain.
Statistics.
What do you think?
Electronic, that's good. You see, the term digital has a number of related words. So if we talk about digital, computer, technology, automation, they all imply almost the same thing. So what we need to do is, we want Indonesia, we want digital, but we think something else could also be used. So either use digital or technology, or, for example, computers, or automation. So what it means is that look for anything that has Indonesia in title, abstract, and keyword, and anything that has digital or technology or computer or automation in abstract technology, abstract keyword and title. And then we have one more term, which is economy. Do we have any synonym or something close to economy that could help? Can you think of anything else that could reflect economy?
Ya, mungkin ada kata lain selain ekonomi yang bisa dipikirkan oleh teman-teman. Finance.
Finance, yes, I see two finances. That's good. So I use finance. But what I want to say is that these synonyms that we have put in here, these ors, it's best if it comes from the literature. So it's best if you go back to your generic literature review and provide, some sample articles that they have used. They said that if you don't use economy, we can use finance. So my point is, because we can have a lot of ors, or this, or that, or, this can go on forever, but we have to stop at some point. So what's important is we have to be very careful which keywords we use. So we can say, look, there's 4 of them here. We just use these 2, digital or technology, and economy or finance, because if you use more keywords, you produce a lot more results. However, if you are working on a research topic that is very niche and very limited, it's okay to use more keywords so that you extract and produce more results. So as you can see here, we can add more search field now. Another field that we can add is, for example, is if you are looking for particular affiliation country. So if I add this, I can only search for articles that are published by Indonesians. But for now, I'm going to leave it as is. And I'm going to delete this last criterion. So I go back to my presentation and then I come back to this one. So when you do systematic literature review, as I said, you have your problem, then you need to have a search method, and then you need to conduct the research. So what I was trying to do is conducting the search, executing the search. So now I'm going to conduct the search and click search and see how many papers are produced. So as you can see here, 1,040 documents are being produced. I can edit this and I can add more keywords here. So I can now add computer or internet. And let's see how it changes. All of a sudden, I get about 90 documents, 90 more documents. So what it means is you can add more keywords if you need more results. So in here, economy, finance, or productivity, for example, or maybe I stop here. And all of a sudden, I get 300 more. But if I go and remove Indonesia, see what happens. So I just delete last, and then we have 2. So internationally, we have a lot more papers. If we exclude Indonesia, then we have 228,000 documents. However, the question for you is, do you want Indonesia to be mentioned in your research or not? Some studies may say, look, I don't want to be limited to Indonesia or any study that has studied Indonesia. I want to look internationally and I understand what's happening. So in that case, you say, look, 220 result is too many. And so what we do is we drop productivity and we also drop these 2. So now we have about half of that result, 170,000 result. Why do we want to drop Indonesia, for example? Because you may say, I want to understand what's digital economy happening, what research is happening in the world internationally, and then understand best lessons learned, and then I apply to Indonesian context. There are some other criteria that Scopus gives us that we can use here. So next is, for example, you can limit it to a certain year. As you can see, we have all the years here listed. So you can say, I'm only interested in last 10 years of publications. So you select all the years from 2012. Now we have 2023 here. The reason that we have here is some of the papers that have been published, they will be published formally next year. So that's why we have this. But because we are in the year 22, we select the last 10 years. And I limit my result to this. Whereas some other may be interested to understand what happened from the year, for example, 1980 and before. So you have the option of understanding what research has been done in the past. So I limit to this, and you can see from 113,000, now we have 77,000 documents. Another thing you want to do is you can say, look, I want to limit it based on language. And I want to limit it to English only or Chinese. Now let's see if we have more language. Can you see your language here, Dia?
Yeah, Indonesian. On the left side. The left side, next to Romania. No, go to the right. Move your cursor to the right, to the most right. Yeah.
Here it is. So we have only 2. See, at least 2 studies in Indonesian language listed in a Scopus. Doesn't mean that we only have 2. So what you could say, you say, okay, I don't want to limit it to Indonesian. And what I want to do is I want to limit it to English and Indonesian. So this way, you want to exclude any other language. So as you can see, from 220,000, we are down to 73,000. In a systematic literature review, what you need to do is every time you add a criterion to limit your search, you need to document it here so that it's repeatable. Remember, systematic literature review is duplicable. So we need to be able to duplicate it if somebody else does it. As you can see, I have identified in phase 1 my keywords. I have said, technology or digital, and economy or finance. So I have clarified what keywords I used, and I indicated how many results I achieved. I said which websites I use, and I said where those keywords appeared in abstract, title, and keywords. And I identified the number of search, and I added new criteria. And every time I added new criteria, I identified how many results were achieved. Now I can add more criteria. So you may still say that, look, 73,000 is a lot of documents to study. I want to limit it a bit further. So what you can do is you may say, I would like to only focus on journal articles, and I don't want to look at books. I don't want to look at reviews and book chapters and conference papers. So this way, you only limit your study to reputable journals. So I limit it to journals. So again, from 72,000, now we are down to 37. Next, what you could do is you can limit your subject area. If you are in engineering discipline, if you are in business, if you are, in medicine, you may say, look, I want anything that's in medicine because I'm interested in understanding digital economy and in medical technologies or in medicine. Or you may say, look, I'm interested in engineering or business or management. So I'm going to go with business and management because I assume most of participants are from this discipline. So now we have 8,500. Going back to my previous slide, every time you add a new criterion, you need to document it here and you need to write down what the results are. If you don't do it, somebody else will not be able to execute it. But look at what Scopus has done for us. It has created a code for us. You can actually copy this code. And if you open Scopus, you can use this code and execute it, and it produces the same result. Now, if you're writing your thesis, what you could do is you can copy and paste this code, put it in your article or put it in your thesis, and it shows whoever wants to do this again, they know how you've done it, what keywords they have used, so they can actually criticize you, or they can analyze your work, and they can repeat your work. So that is the difference, whereas with generic literature review, we never do this. Now, what happens is you have now 8,500 documents. From here, you say, look, there is nothing more I can do to filter more results out. What I want to do is you need now to go through all 8,000 documents. Now, this is going to take time. You will not have the opportunity to read every single article. What you do is, you see, we have also abstracts here for each article. Now, you may say, look, I don't have time to read abstract of 8,000 articles, but what I can do, I can only read titles. So you can read titles, and the ones that are not relevant, you can exclude them. And you can include the ones that are relevant. So in this way, you can say number 1 and 2 are relevant, and 4 and 3 is not relevant, and you exclude number 3. Another thing I want to show you here is you can export this result. So if you click on export, there are multiple websites and tools here that you can use in order to extract and download your findings. So, for example, you can choose to download it as CSV file, or if you're using Mendeley, you can use it as Mendeley, or this software is actually very popular software to undertake bibliometrics and systematic literature review. So you can download it in this format, and then you can choose what fields do you want to be included in this document. So let's say we go with all this. I remove author ID, and I want, you know, all this, and then I export it. So here is my Excel file. Oops, so why it didn't include everything?
I think because you tick
because
the-
I just selected this tree.
Yeah.
But if I select all, it will include everything. So what you can do is you can select the ones that are relevant, and then you can extract them for further analysis. So this way you can go, for example, from 8,000 to 1,000. So this way you can only see which articles by reading the title. So in this case, for example, you see this article is related to Czech Republic. You want to say whether you want to include a European country in your study or not. Here it's, you know, Gulf Corporation economies. So as you see, you can see which ones are relevant to you and which ones are not, and then focus on that. If I go back to my slides here, you can filter based on result, identify the numbers. Once you filter based on result, next is abstract. You say, look, this is interesting. I'm going to study and include this. Then you read the abstract. By reading the abstract, you get a little bit of more information about the article, and you get a little bit of more familiarity whether or not you want to include this article. If you, out of 1,000 papers that you have selected based on title, when you read abstract, you realize that only 200 of them or 100 of them are relevant to your study. So you only select those 100 articles. And lastly, you go and you read the full paper. And when you read full paper, you realize that, for example, 40, 50 of them are not relevant. And after all, you end up with 50 papers, 100 papers for your systematic literature review. And this way, we try by using this approach, you know, make sure that our method is duplicable and repeatable as a research method. So I'd like to pause here for a second and see if there is any questions. And if there is not, then I'm going to show you another example for the rest of the systematic literature review. But I just want to see if there's any question at this point.
Ya, silakan. Apakah ada pertanyaan dari teman-teman semua? It seems like you're very shy to ask questions, Babak.
Yeah, that's all okay. You know, I would definitely welcome questions, and the more questions, the better. So please, you know, feel comfortable, either write it in the chat box or ask directly if you have any questions. So if there is no questions, I'm going to continue with the rest. But Dia, is it okay if we have like a few minutes break and then we continue?
Yeah, sure.
So, I see there's one question. Maybe I answered this and then we have a break.
Yeah.
Are there methods or guidelines to better determine the appropriate research keywords to use? This is a good question. And you know, everything about systematic literature review is about the keywords that you use. If you use more keywords, you produce more results. If you use fewer keywords, you get less results. Sometimes you may miss good papers because you did not use good keywords. So if we use bad keywords, we produce bad results. right? So keywords are very, very important. How we do this? The guideline that we use is you normally refer to your generic literature review. You try to understand what are the key terms, common terms that are being repeated. Sometimes some papers recommend related keywords and terms. Sometimes you can find and refer to some influential papers and say that, for example, digital is being translated or is being interpreted as this and that word. So you get alternative terms. And when you do generic literature review, if you work with your supervisor or with your colleagues, or you can present it to some experts, so you show it to some expert and you try to get a second opinion. So you get a second opinion from somebody else to make sure what else needs to be in there. So advice that I have is that you try to use multiple approaches, multiple ways, systematic generic literature review, referring to some influential papers, getting some second opinions, and make sure you get the right number of keywords and the right keyword in terms of the terms and quality of keywords.
Babak, the one last, I have additional question. What about the number of papers? Can that be an indication whether our keywords are good or not?
That's a good one. So in some research, if, for example, you are looking for COVID, 19 cases in one rural areas, in, for example, poorer areas in a particular country, you may not be able to produce a lot of results. So some systematic literature reviews, there's actually not many papers right now on those topics, whereas some topics, there are a lot of papers out there. So if you choose a topic that there's a lot of papers like digital economy, then you want to use a few keywords to make sure that you don't get hundreds of results, hundreds of thousands of results. You want to limit it. Whereas if your topic is on something that is very niche, very unique, very focused, you can be a bit relaxed with your keywords and use fewer keywords so you produce good number of papers. Now, if you ask me what is a good number of paper, it's actually a very tough question to answer. Normally, if you look at literature review that people do in their references, some use 10, 20, some use 100. It really depends on the topic. But I can say that generally something between 30 to 100 selected final paper is something that is very typical and common. Some papers do more than 100, but I haven't seen many papers that have done less than 30. In fact, if you don't produce more than 30, 40 papers as part of your literature review, it shows your topic is so new, there's not many recent studies. So probably systematic literature review is not good for that study. In fact, Dia, it's good that you asked this question because systematic literature review is good for research that you have some historical studies on that topic. If the topic is so new that there is not many recent studies, then you don't need to conduct a systematic literature review.
Thank you, Babak. I think that's also the sign that we need to break at the end of the first session of this talk. How long to
I'm okay with maybe 4 or 5 minutes and then we can continue.
Okay, thank you. We will break for 5 minutes and we will be back at 10:33.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Babak. Untuk mahasiswa, silakan. Mungkin ada yang mau disampaikan dan saya punya presensi untuk, jadi jangan lupa untuk presensi ke mana, ke Siam ya, karena kalau misalkan disuruh ini Anda hadir di sini karena permintaan kelas, maka harus presensi di Siam. Selain itu saya ada presensi ini untuk catatan buat kita untuk laporan ke kampus, berapa mahasiswa yang hadir hari ini. Dan juga pada presensi itu Anda teman-teman semua bisa memberikan masukan. Kira-kira ke depannya kalau mau ada talk seperti ini, topiknya apa, kemudian pembicaranya mungkin siapa, caranya bagaimana, apakah online, apakah offline, kemudian berapa lama, jam berapa enaknya, dan seterusnya. Jadi saya mohon bantuannya teman-teman semua, silakan mengisi survei yang saya bagi di sini. Kita istirahat dulu ya, sampai jam 10.33 dan kemudian ketemu lagi. Yang butuh ke toilet atau apa, silakan. We still have one minute more, Babak.
Okay, what's this link there?
Okay, are you ready, Babak, for the next session?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Let's do this. All right. I hope that so far it has been not confusing and you have seen some value in this. So what I'm going to do, systematic literature review, there's a lot of papers, a lot of guidelines. If you just go to, Google Scholar, in fact, let me show you, you will see there is a lot of papers on, how to conduct systematic literature review. So if you just let's look for systematic literature reviews, there's a lot of papers, guidance on systematic literature review. For example, even though this is in software engineering, Kitchenham is one of the most popular sources you could use. Watson is the one that actually Dia used. I suppose Dia used Watson and in some other version. So there's a lot of papers on systematic literature review. And what I'm presenting today is rather, I think I have not shared my screen. So so here it is. If you Google systematic literature review, you will see a lot of papers in the literature. And this one is one of the most popular ones, Kitchenham. Even though this is in software engineering discipline, you can use the step and guidelines in any discipline. But there are also, other guides and other papers, some of which are free to download. So what I want to say is that this is a very established discipline. This is a very established research method, and there's a lot of guides and information available on the internet for that. So next, I would like to continue with some examples. Now, I have discussed very briefly an example of digital economy in Indonesia. Now, I would like to focus on another example and think about what is digital transformation. We all have heard of digital transformation, and this is actually based on one of my recent articles. So if I go to my own profile, interesting is that this is the example that I'm going to show you: digital transformation and digital business strategy in e-commerce. And as you can see, this is actually the highest cited paper that I've ever published, because for some reason, this is actually for free and available. One thing, so this example that I'm going to go through, you can find it if you're interested for reading. Just go to my profile and you can see the full article available here. So the example that I'm going to produce is the example that I have with my other students, Aisha, but also we have another example with Dia, of course. Let me actually, Dia, bring that up as well. So this is also another example. I want to share this: value co-creation in firm-sponsored online communities. We have used a systematic literature review with Dia. I want to bring this up because if you are feeling more comfortable to work with Dia, you can get in contact with her and and get to know how we did it. So we have the method, as you can see here. The type, design, method, and approach we have used is a systematic literature review. So this can be used as a standalone independent method, and we have demonstrated here the way we have used it. So if you need guidelines in terms of how to do this and that, we in section 3 we have identified how we've done our research. But in this presentation, I'm using my other example and my other research. It's because I actually have used it in my other presentation. So we all are, familiar with the term digital transformation. You hear it a lot. The question is, what does it mean? When you talk about digital transformation, people think about digital projects, for example. They say, if you use new software, if you upgrade your software, you're doing digital transformation. But for some people, it's more than that. They say, you need to do digital integration. So if you use some enterprise resource planning software, cloud solutions, analytics, AI solutions, this is when you do digital transformation. But for some other people, Digital transformation is about business transformation, leadership change, leadership transformation, change in business model, change in thinking. So what is digital transformation, and what are some of the important factors in digitally transforming your organization in, for example, retail industry? So let's say this is my question, and I have done some generic literature review to come up with this question, that this is important. I want to understand what digital transformation means, and I want to understand what are some of the critical factors that may influence that. So going back to the earlier slide that I had, so as you can see, I can answer this question in various ways. I can answer it with survey, I can answer it with interviews, with other methods. If I want to understand what is digital transformation and what factors are important in digital transformation, I can just interview experts. I can just interview managers and understand what digital transformation means. Or I can just run a questionnaire. I think these are some of the typical ways that people use in order to answer questions like this. But I want you to think about questions that you have in your research. If you are, doing an undergraduate research, postgraduate research, a PhD research, or if you are an academic and you are doing, research in your own university, you have some questions for yourself. So you can think about, as I'm going to go through these slides, how you could use systematic literature review to answer your questions, and use my questions as example. So going back to the first step, which was problem identification, we need to identify our research questions and understand why they are important. So in this example, this is my question. This is how I write it down, that what factors represent digital transformation and what are critical success factors in digitally transforming firms. Now, another example could be this paper that we have, and we have identified our research question in this paper, for example. So you can also refer to this, where we, in this paragraph, identify this study aims to address how firm-sponsored online communities enable, constrain, and shape value creation. So what I mean is that in systematic literature review, you have to identify and clarify exactly what your research question is. It doesn't matter what it is, whatever it is, you need to be very clear about the question. Next is think about what keywords you want to use. Look, when you look at my research question, what are the important terms here? The important term is digital. Another term that's important is transformation. This term is not important in my search. Factor is not important. You don't need to include factors because factor needs to be extracted from the papers that you find. And when I go to the next question, another factor that is important, so we have digital transformation, then we have retail industry. Now, if I use retail industry in my search, I'm gonna produce fewer results. If I don't include it, I will produce more results, and I can later on only select papers that are related to retail industry. So in step 2 is specify your methodology. In here, I identify, use combination of few keywords. So I can use digital. What else can I use? I can also say information technology. Now, this is what I have found from the literature. One person may say that digital or technology, only technology, not information. Or someone could say digital or internet. It depends on your generic review and depends on, opinions you get from your experts. And if I want to say digital transformation, what else can I use instead of transformation? We could come up with different words, but based on our generic literature review, we found that strategy could also be helpful, even though strategy doesn't necessarily mean transformation, but it's in the similar family of literature. So these are the type of keywords we use. As you can see, digital or transformation and transformation or strategy. Now, what website or database are we going to use? We have used, in this example, for example, you could use Science Direct, Google Scholar, or Scopus. It's really up to you. Preferably, you know, Scopus or Science Direct, because they give you a lot of options for the search. But if you don't have access to them, you can rely on Google Scholar. The problem is it doesn't give you a lot of options, but you can do a coding, you know, the way that I did in Scopus, and Google Scholar does execute those coding. And if you want to, for example, focus it on particular journals or conferences, you can do it. For example, you say, I want to focus on only professional journals and magazines like Financial Review, or you can focus on academic journals. Next is you need to set your inclusion and exclusion criteria. So you need to say what language of the paper you're looking at. So is it English or other languages? Are you looking for peer-reviewed articles or anything? Then you can also filter it by year. So which years you're looking at. And after that, as we discussed, you can look at title, abstract, and the body of the research. Now, in my example, as I indicated earlier, we went to Scopus. We used these keywords, and we limited to the year. We only selected English papers. We went through title, abstract, and body, and then we came up with these findings. We looked at from year 2000 to 2017, and we came up with 292 papers. Then we looked at relevant articles based on their title, and then from 92, we ended up with 54 articles. We then read all the articles in full, and we came up with 28 articles. As you can see in this table, I have also indicated the source journals. We only looked at journals, and we only looked at journals in the business and information systems discipline. So we have identified all this inclusion, exclusion criteria in our paper. One nice thing about systematic literature review is that it gives you the opportunity to use tables like this. Normally with generic literature review, you don't produce tables like this. You know, you don't say where your sources come from. You don't say the years, you don't say how, you know, initial search was and how many of them you included. Normally we just, you know, use them as we feel is needed. So from this point forward, I'm going to interpret my results, and I'm going to demonstrate and share my results by using different tables. So as you can see here, there are some interesting findings when you use systematic literature review. All of a sudden you find that there are some particular journals that are more interested in this topic, whereas with generic literature review, we don't have that. You may also understand which countries, for example, are interested and have done more work on this topic. And you can also see what the methods those papers have used in their study. Now, this is a research that I did with my other PhD students. If I go back to the paper that Dia and I wrote together, so we demonstrated our, so as you can see here, section 2, we have our generic literature review. So we have reviewed the literature. And in section 3, we have demonstrated our research method. So we have said exactly how we've done things. And in section 4, we present findings. So as you can see, the structure is very similar. It's just that the topic is different. And then we have produced tables like this, in which we present some of the findings and the codings that we have found. Now, I don't want to go through too much of that because the content and the topic and question is not familiar to you, but I want to show that with any systematic literature review, you can produce tables like this. Another thing you can produce as a result of systematic literature review is you can show the trend of publications over a year. So you can say, for example, digital transformation in 2006, 7, and 8, and 9, there was nothing that we found, but then interest on this topic increased over time. So if you are in medicine or in engineering or in business, accounting, finance, you can, for example, conduct systematic literature review and show how interest on your research and your topic has changed over time. You can produce a lot of cool charts. In this example, we also looked at which industries have been studied. So we realized that most of the studies have been with consulting firms, following by media and banking and automotive. So when you systematically review the literature, there are some interesting findings that you can extract. Now, another thing we've done is you can use charts like this. So as you can see, we have said that we looked at top 16 information system journals. Some of you may say, I want to focus on top 10, top 20, top 50 journals in my discipline. Some of you may say, I want to open up to all disciplines because there's not many papers in my area. And some of you may choose to focus on conferences, particular conferences. But whatever you do, you need to have a justification of why you have that focus, and then identify the number of papers that you find as you go through selection criteria. So again, I'd like to pause here and see if there is any questions before I proceed.
Ya, silakan, apakah ada pertanyaan? Ini adalah salah satu cara kita lakukan untuk menganalisis temuan kita gitu. Jadi kita bisa bikin grafik berdasarkan tahun, temuan paper yang dipublish. Kalau kelihatan paper dipublish tahun itu banyak, artinya kan memang bahasan itu sedang tren gitu. Sehingga kita memberikan justifikasi kepada kita bahwa kita memang layak meneliti itu karena semakin tinggi misalkan minat penulis dan pembaca untuk area seperti itu. Mungkin ada yang mau ditanyakan terkait dengan interpretasi finding. Yeah, I think Babak, interpretation part is the hardest part of the systematic literature review. It's hard to know. Have we done enough, or should we dig it more, or how can we get the clue that okay, this is enough, or do I miss something from the paper and that kind of thing? What do you think?
No, absolutely, you made a very good point. Interpretation of results, because this part, when you do use the keywords, you go to Science Direct. And this is rather technical, it's rather mechanical. In here, for example, if I go back to the Scopus, using something like this and producing this result, this is the easy part, rather. We need to get the keywords right, the selection criteria right. But then going through these many articles and finding the relevant ones, and then reading them and extracting useful insights from them is the trick, is the challenge. So some of those results are rather easier to demonstrate, because something like this is more descriptive result. I can just look at the journal and how many papers I have found and produce a table like this. The more challenging part is when you read the article and you need to analyze the articles. That becomes a bit challenging, and that is the part that takes time. And you get good at that by continuously reading articles, by checking it with your supervisor or somebody else or another colleague, and getting another second opinion and reading the papers multiple times to be able to extract knowledge and insight from it. So when we look at interpreting systematic literature review findings, there are two types of findings. One type is like what I have showed here. It's rather descriptive finding, that you don't really need to think much. All you need to do is put together results and produce some descriptive demographic findings that just show what the scene is about. What is difficult and more challenging is when you need to read the papers actually and extract insight and knowledge from the paper to be able to answer your research question. So in order to be able to produce results, with your generic literature review, you don't have any mechanism and system for extracting findings. Whereas with systematic literature review, you try to be very systematic and disciplined in terms of extracting knowledge and findings. So what you do is when you find papers and you read a paper, for example, I go back to this paper. If this paper, for example, is one of the papers that you have found in your systematic literature review, what you need to do is you need to go and read the paper from the beginning. And if you find something interesting, if you find, for example, this part interesting, you need to highlight it and code it. So you need to be able to use some software tools or Excel or manually be able to say, oh, this is interesting, this statement says something that I find useful. So you copy and you paste it in a Word document and you say, I'm giving it a category. So you give it a label. For example, you said this paragraph is important. I want to call it something. And then this way you start coding, something we call code. So we say systematic literature review coding code book. In here you say code 1, for example, digital. What does digital mean? So this is code 1, and then I have found this paper from Dia's paper in 2021, who says this. So this becomes one code. So you say element 1. Then you find another one, element 2 from paper X, and another element from paper Y. Another could be number 3, could also be from paper X. So you can see, there's also another statement here. I copy paste this. So you put it in here. And you continue with all the papers that you find. When you do this, then we have something we call coding. So we call it open coding. So you find any paragraph, any statement that is relevant to your research question. So I go back to my research questions. So you can use your research question to extract meanings and findings from the papers that you have found. So then you start coding the papers based on your research question. When you code them, you move forward, and the ones that are more related to each other, you group them. For example, if I have 10 codes here and I say, number 1, I highlight it as yellow, and this code in number 3 also in yellow, they are related. So then I put them together. So, and then I say, look, this is a green. This one is also green. So I move yellows next to each other because they talk about the same thing, which is about what does digital mean. And this one, code 2, for example, is about factor 1 in digital transformation. And in here, I have 2 factors in green. And code 3 could be factor 2 in digital transformation. And then I have, for example, item 4 in red. And then anything that, so you see, I have factor 1, factor 2, and the definition of digital. If I go back to my presentation, my first research question was, what does digital transformation mean? And then question 2 is, what are critical factors? So I come up with factor 1, factor 2, factor 3. So this way, you end up finding results and presenting a systematic, disciplined way in order to report your findings. So again, I'd like to pause here for a second and see if there's any questions.
Ya, apakah ada pertanyaan, terutama berkaitan dengan coding ya. Jadi, waktu kita systematic literature review, sudah dapat papernya, itu belum berhenti. Dari sana kita masih harus melakukan mengcoding, mengekstrak paper itu menjadi sesuatu yang bermakna. Nah, caranya apa ya? Ini adalah salah satu cara yang dari GTM. GTM itu bukan gerakan tutup mulut, tapi grounded theory method. Jadi kalau kita lewat itu, caranya seperti ini. Apakah ini satu-satunya cara? Sebetulnya tidak ya, masih ada cara yang lain. Cuma memang ini adalah GTM ini salah satu cara yang paling populer. Silakan. Mungkin Neila. Ada pengalaman waktu literatur review, Neila? Atau Rifan? Tidak ada? There's no questions, Babak, you can continue.
Okay, thank you. So moving forward, for example, in this article, when we came up with a number of factors, so each box that you see here is one factor. What we decided to do is to group them. You know, with these groupings, you try to give meaning to your results. Whatever your research question is, after all, with systematic literature review, we want to come up with some frameworks or some visualization of findings that help us communicate our findings with our audience. So in this article, for example, because we were looking for success factors, we came up with about 20 factors. We grouped them in 3 groups. So each circle is one group. And we then discussed and analyzed what each of these factors mean to us and related to our questions. So as you can see, we have name of factors here, and then we numbered them. And in our conclusion and discussion, we discussed what each of them is about. Now, I obviously don't expect you to understand these factors and grouping here, but what I want to show is that when you go through a systematic way of undertaking research, you know, you identify your keywords, your database, selection, inclusion criteria, you come up with some descriptive findings, and after that, you present your findings and you demonstrate what your contributions are to be able to communicate with everyone. So that is in general and in short what I wanted to say about systematic literature review. As I said, you know, there are a lot of articles that you can use in terms of systematic literature reviews. If you are interested in reading more guides, I will be happy to share my slides. But today's presentation was really an introduction to the topic. Now, for the rest of the talk, I have a few very small activities for you to get you to think about your research. And while I am here, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. So I would like you to reflect on the exercises that we did. And I want to pause here and ask you to write down your research question, if you can, on a piece of paper or, you know, on your Word document or whatever. And I'm going to help you to go through this method and through the steps and to see how systematic literature review, what it means to your research. So Dia, I'm going to give 1 or 2 minutes, pause for 2 minutes, and ask everyone to think about what their current research question is, so we can work on that.
Oke, Babak. Ya, silakan menuliskan apa risetnya. Mungkin saya akan minta mahasiswa untuk ini ya, menjadi sukarelawan. Siapa yang mau menjadi sukarelawan? Nanti kalau ditanya, akan angkat tangan. Nela, bagaimana bisa Nela?
Okay, if you have your research question, can we continue, or do you need one more time?
I think most of them are preparing for Jumu'ah praying, so they don't.
Sorry, what's that?
Sorry.
Sorry, what did you say? Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think some of the students are preparing for the Jumu'ah pray, so they don't.
Oh.
I have one of my master postgraduate student, but I think she also has problem with the internet connection.
Okay, so if that's the issue, maybe I just pause here. We don't need to necessarily. So I wasn't sure, to what extent we may be prepared for going with our research questions. And I think the example, so I have showed two examples today. One was about digital transformation, a paper that we have published. Everyone can go, for example, to my profile and find, my recent papers. But also another example was digital economy in Indonesia. So we have, we went through Scopus, for example, and how Scopus can help us to undertake a research like that, and using systematic literature review. So, and given that, this is probably for some of the participants here is first workshop on a topic like this, hopefully this seminar today gives you an idea of what systematic literature review is. Is it useful for your research? And if it is useful, I think you can go and use some of the articles that are available already online in terms of guidelines. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any question. You have my email. You can just look me up or approach Idia and then execute the systematic literature review. I can tell you that the first time that you do is not going to be easy because a little bit confusing, but the best way to approach this is to try to find a systematic literature review that is already been published in your area. And then when you go through that paper, it gives you an understanding of what type of paper, what the structure should look like, or the research or report that you're producing, and what steps normally are gone through. So with that, I would like to conclude my talk a little bit earlier than what I expected, but and just see if there is any final thoughts, any observations, any question, anything you would like to share.
Babak, I have a question that
Sure.
maybe that also the question is in my colleagues and my students' mind. So how can we know that a systematic literature review report is acceptable? I mean, the quality of the report. How can we identify whether this, okay, my report is good enough or my report is not good enough? So what kind of tick list that at least we should take attention at?
That's a very good question, Dia. First of all, you need to make sure you have a very clear, disciplined method in place. So your methodology in terms of how you want to do it, what research questions you have is clear. If you get a good research question, a research question that has not been answered before or has been answered, but you look at it from a different angle, that is step one. Step two is make sure you get your method right. So you have a very document clear steps that you're going to go through in order to, what searches you're going to use, what keywords, and how you're going to conduct it. But number three, which is the most important thing, is you need to ask yourself how reviewing the literature can help coming up with new knowledge. Now, I give another example. All countries in the world, we all have experienced, the pandemic and COVID-19. And there's been a lot of research done in this study. So systematic literature review is relevant to studying pandemic because we know there's a lot of studies. So that is a relevant one. But can we think about a question that has not been answered before or has not been well investigated, that reviewing past studies can help answering that question, So we can all think about different questions, but for example, I wonder how male versus female responded to COVID treatment in, for example, in Asia, comparing to Europe. And then can we draw some conclusion from that? Is there any lessons learned in Asian countries that can be used in European countries and vice versa? So you need to find an angle that can answer a question, an interesting question, by reviewing past work, by reviewing a lot of previous work. And if you can come up with something new, a new answer, a new way of looking at this problem, then you can think about, possibility of publication in a good place. You're on mute, dear.
Thank you. Yeah. So if I can make a conclusion, first, you want to make a good systematic literature review is the research question. It should be clear. It should be a question that has not been answered before. And the second one is the method. It should we should have maybe a clear method of conducting systematic literature review. And the last one is the new knowledge that we extract from the papers that we got. Is that correct, Babak?
That's correct. That's absolutely correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And any more questions for participants here? Okay, I think that's the last question, Babak.
All right. With that, I'd like to conclude the session, and thank you again for the invite. I hope you enjoyed it, everyone. I hope you found it understandable and clear. I tried to keep it as simple as possible. But all the best with your research and with your projects. And yes, any questions you may have, feel free to reach out via email.
Thank you, Babak, and we are waiting for your slides. You can send that to my email and I will distribute it to my colleagues and my students here. And this is the end of the session. We are very pleased and honored to have you here. And because this is also maybe the first exposure to this kind of method, so we are still trying to absorb and rethink and also maybe understand it more. Thank you, Babak. Hopefully we can see again. We can meet you again in another session. See you.
Absolutely.
See you soon. Bye.
See ya. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Babak.
Bye.
Jadi terima kasih banyak ya sudah hadir hari ini. Jadi apa yang disampaikan oleh Babak tadi adalah tentang teknik kita untuk melakukan literatur review. Sebetulnya literatur review sendiri, systematic literature review sendiri sudah bisa menjadi sebuah penelitian. Barangkali kalau teman-teman sini ada yang ingin mencari topik, mungkin bisa mulai mempertimbangkan melakukan systematic literature review. Tetapi seperti yang Babak sampaikan tadi, systematic literature review yang bagus itu harus dimulai dari pertanyaan penelitian yang bagus, kemudian metode yang clear, dan analisis kita sehingga menghasilkan pengetahuan baru. Pengetahuan baru itu bukan artinya pengetahuan yang tidak ada sebelumnya. Pengetahuan baru itu seperti ilmu yang kita sampaikan dalam angle yang berbeda. Jadi misalkan biasanya kita bicara COVID secara umum, COVID dampaknya seperti apa. Lalu kita mau buka angle baru nih, bagaimana perempuan berkeluarga melihat COVID. Nah, ini bisa menjadi sebuah pengetahuan yang baru karena pengetahuannya sama, tetapi angle melihatnya kita lihat melalui angle yang baru. Jadi saya suka membayangkan analisis ini seperti kita ngambil foto kalau yang suka fotografi ya, atau seperti kita membuat film kalau yang suka film. Sebuah film yang bagus atau sebuah foto yang bagus itu biasanya dia bisa mengambil sesuatu melalui angle yang bagus dalam proporsinya yang tepat. Kurang lebih begitu dari saya untuk menutup pertemuan hari ini. Terima kasih banyak atas kehadirannya. Mohon maaf apabila ada kekurangan dan terima kasih untuk saran-sarannya. Saya sangat menghargai sarannya karena ini memberikan saya insight ya apa yang mahasiswa butuhkan untuk 3-in-1 visiting professor. Saya tutup. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Jangan lupa presensi.